Shalom, shalom, everybody. Welcome back to another Pulse of Israel episode, not in our ancestral, beautiful Judean hills, our homeland Israel, still in southern Florida. And I am here with Dr. Irving Berkowitz, Dean Emeritus of Palm Beach State College. And I had the fabulous opportunity of listening to a lecture of his at FAU just a few days ago, where he spoke about Masada, Warsaw, and the growing anti-Semitism today. And I thought it would be a fabulous opportunity, being in the area, to have the opportunity to sit down with Dr. Berkowitz so that we can share some of this very, very important information with all of you. Because as many of you might know, I've been talking about in all of my talks lately and on my programs about the absolute shock that world jury, Israeli jury, American jury have been feeling as an after effect of October 7th. Not the shock, the fact that it happened, that we were massacred, of the most horrendous, horrific massacre of Jews since the Holocaust, but even more than that, the shock that in a response to that massacre, not only are we not receiving sympathy, empathy, support from the world and from partners of ours who we thought were partners of ours in Western enlightened society, but that Jew hatred is growing by leaps and bounds, and we're not receiving the support for what we experienced. Rather, our enemies that perpetrated the horrific massacre against us are receiving support from the world. So, Dr. Berkowitz, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Avi. I'm very honored to be here with you.
The pleasure's all mine. And how would you like to start off talking to everybody with that introduction of the reality we're in today?
Well, I think maybe a good place to start would be why I gave the talk that I did, the one that you attended. This was a talk that looked at two very significant historical events in Jewish history that had striking similarities, and both of which bear a resemblance to what is happening today. The idea that Jews have historically not resisted when pushed back by Jew haters is something that I have lived with all my life, and has been a source of, I think, considerable shame to many Jewish people. The idea behind giving this talk on Masada, although Masada and the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising were not the only examples, they may be the most symbolically, historically significant examples from which we can derive takeaways, important takeaways on what is happening today and what is our obligation. So I've pointed out in all my years the fact that I've referred to World War II and the Holocaust as World War II and a half. The Allies had partners in World War II, and the Axis had allies in World War II. But it's the Jews that had no one. And I mean not only the obvious example of the turning away of the famous ship St. Louis from the shores of the United States, sending people back, not all of them, but many of them, to the horrible fate of the Holocaust. But the very fact that a conference called the Avion Conference was held in 1938, at which 32 nations met to address the question of what are we going to do for the Jewish people, for Jewish refugees. And the answer coming out of that conference was nothing.
Yeah.
And so, as Chaim Weizmann so aptly put it, Jews found themselves caught between two worlds. One world in which they were not welcome to stay, and another world in which they were not welcome to enter. And of course, I can't be the only one. I know I've heard you often speak about the fact that God blessed us with our ancestral home and the return after thousands of years to our ancestral home try and imagine what difference this might have made to the Jewish people and to the magnitude of the Holocaust that took place absent our homeland. So talking about Masada rising up against an overwhelming military force like the Romans, and the Warsaw Ghetto fighters, 750 of whom rose up against 2,000 extremely well-armed Nazi soldiers. And not because they thought they could win, but rather because they defended their honor and really the honor of the Jewish people, and said, we will not allow others who hate us to determine where, when, and how we will die. And that was the choiceless choice, to use Lawrence Langer's expression, the choiceless choice they made then, and it's a choice we have to make now, because as I've said to you before, Avi, wherever we've turned, whether it's building bridges with the Black community or building bridges with the Muslim community, when it was time for us to have their support, to see them actually take a stand on our behalf against Jew hatred, they didn't. And I just want to point out how often we, the Jewish people, march in their parades out in front for Black Lives Matter, or when there's any act of violence against innocent Muslims. But we have not seen that, and I think it's time for us to call them out for their lack of support, the shocking silence that you referred to yourself.
Right. And it's interesting because again, my background is organizational psychology, so I have some psychology background, and I understand the psyche of a Jew by being a Jew and knowing Jewish history and studying Jewish history. Like I told you, I instill in my kids and anyone I talk to, any youth I talk to, the importance of learning history and Jewish history and biblical history in order to be more empowered of who we are, our own identity, and how we live in the world. And an anecdote I wanted to add was I was living in New York in the 1990s, young married after I served in the army, studied in yeshiva in Israel. Back in America studying because I got married to my wife on our way back to Israel. And I remember reading an article in a Jewish newspaper. It's supposed to be 96, 97. And the article was praising the American Jewish community and organizations for assisting the Muslim organizations for getting on their feet and establishing themselves after we, the Jews, were the immigrants to America and succeeded in learning to live in America, setting up organizations on the city level, the state level, the national level, right? And so proud that we're now helping the Muslims community as they were immigrating en masse to America. And this wasn't even history. I was looking at myself as a student of current events. And I was looking at what was going on in Europe already. This is the 90s. And I'm already seeing the disintegration of European society with the mass immigration of Muslims into Europe in the 90s. And I wrote a letter to the editor of this Jewish newspaper saying, I'm all for us Jews helping whoever needs help and obviously praising those in the community who are helping, but how are we ignoring the reality? Just look at Europe now and look what the mass of the Muslim community is doing in Europe, not only endangering European society, but endangering the Jews in those European countries and cities by us priding ourselves on helping the Muslim community establish itself in America. We are burying the grave of American Jewry with our own hands, excited to do it and priding ourselves on doing it.
I couldn't agree with you more, and let me add to that. The Jews that are out in front of the
By the way, it didn't print my letter.
Oh,
the newspaper
they
did not print my letter.
Well, I'm not surprised. I mean, my mind immediately goes to the UN report that validates all the claims of sexual violence, and no one wants to deal with the story. Mainstream legacy media do not want to address the UN report that confirms the sexual atrocities. And then add on top of that what we all know, the fact that the feminist community, the feminist movement here has failed to even address the question of violence toward Jewish women, or the Jews that march on behalf of BLM, not knowing that the charter for BLM, a portion of which comes from the Hamas charter.
Yep.
And the importance of not just, I mean, if you want to...
But understand, for those who don't know, and this, I was also talking about in my programs at the beginning of the BLM movement and riots, it's anti-Semitic. There's Jew hatred in the charter of the BLM, written organizational documentation, is what Dr. Berkowitz is referring to.
Well, in last year, an article was published in a prominent newspaper here in South Florida, alleging that Israel was an apartheid state, a genocidal state, and reinforcing the old trope, the old blood libel trope. And for days we waited for leaders of any of the Jewish organizations. You would expect a community relations council or something to come out and say something. Nobody did. I was called, I drafted an op-ed piece, and I challenged. And it was published in the Jewish Journal, widely circulated here, and it was a retort to the claims, the apocryphal claims made by a coalition of imams in South Florida. This is partly what I'm trying to say is the kind of resistance that isn't armed resistance. It's not the use of guns, but using our hands and our minds to take the time to write op-ed pieces, using our mouths to speak to each other, and to educate each other. But we live in an age where the big lie, the fundamental problem, in my opinion, I don't know that you can reduce it all to this, is the notion, the old notion, that everything Jewish is evil and everything evil is Jewish. And it has me fearing what will happen on October 7, 2024. What's going to happen on April 20th, 2039, the 150th anniversary of Hitler's birthday? What's going to happen in 2038 on the anniversary of Kristallnacht? Do we honestly think Jew haters will not celebrate those days? I know they will. And I know you know they will. And so the silence of everybody, this is what Elie Wiesel said. He said it was, it was indifference that hurt us more than anything. And today, people ignore the truth, or they're indifferent to the truth. But I do believe fundamentally, Avi, that there are more people that respect Jews, but they're afraid. And a lot of Jewish people are afraid. And the question is, will they have the courage? Would they be able to make the choices that the people of Masada did, that the Jews in the Warsaw ghetto did? Most of those Jews in the ghetto didn't.
Right.
And the ghetto fighters that did were rallied. because they knew what their fate would be, and they decided that that their destiny was going to be a matter of choice and not chance.
Right. And I think the sad irony is that too many Jews believe, and this is not just in America, but or around the world, but also in Israel, believe, well, if the world is pressuring us to do X, then we must appease them. Because if we do not stand up for ourselves and our identity and our rights and properly protecting ourselves according to what we know should be done, but it'll upset the world, then we're really going to lose the support of the world. And they miss the fact that it's the actual opposite. It's only when we own our identity and we stand up for ourselves that inspires everybody else, all the other nations of the world. Oh my God, yeah, the Jews are standing up for themselves, and that's who they are, and that's their homeland, and they're standing up to evil. Then the world will respect us.
When we respect ourselves.
Okay.
You know, the bully turns away from the victim that isn't intimidated by the bully.
So you are more experienced than me. Why or where are our organizations and organizational leaders, communal leaders, even rabbinic leaders, why are they not doing this? How do you explain that to regular Jews who are waiting to be led? Waiting to be led.
I mean, I wish that was a question posed to the leaders themselves. You know, why did so many Jews, particularly German Jews, think that what was happening in Germany was simply going to pass?
Right. Exactly,
you know,
what they said.
Otto Frank decided it was time to leave Germany in 1933. Unfortunately, Otto Frank went to Amsterdam, and it didn't take long for the Germans to find him there. But so many he knew, and so many stories we have of Jews that just thought this will pass. So they say, well, after all, we're German. We're not just Jewish, we're German. And only later on did it become clear that you weren't German Jews, you were Jews living in Germany.
Yeah.
We are not American Jews, we're Jews living in America. We're not British Jews, Jews living in the United Kingdom. And where is the Jewish leadership today? What are they still investing with the hope that we will build these bridges with non-Jewish communities? And they have done that for the last 5-10 years. And all I can see is the bridge that was built has one lane.
Yep.
Going in one direction.
Yeah.
And we need to call them out.
Yeah. So then my follow-up question, because again, you keep on referencing Germany and our experience and the absence of leadership in calling out reality there and acting like we should have in order to save our lives. How do you see the future of America and for American Jewry?
Wow. Well, I don't have a very positive view of what's happening right now. Although I said to you, I believe the Jewish people have many more allies, or many more respect us than revile us. There are far fewer deniers than there are revisionists. There are many more revisionists, but there are far more believers than there are even revisionists and deniers.
When you're referring to the revisionists,
I'm talking about the Holocaust itself.
Got it.
But, you know, what I have found disturbing in recent years is how Jewish people are turning away from Holocaust education.
Really?
Jewish people. I have heard Jewish people
consciously saying, I don't want...
They will ask me to come and speak, and they'll either say, please, anything but the Holocaust, enough with the Holocaust.
Wow.
Or I've heard people say, you know, it's one thing to tell about it, it's another thing to dwell upon it. And, you know, I don't know of any professional Holocaust survivor or Holocaust scholar. We don't do this to make a living or to make money. I do this, and I've been doing this for one reason only. Because it's the Jewish people that know the importance of keeping the story of humanity's inhumanity in the presence of everyone. Always reminding them. I make it very clear that I focused my life on the study of the Holocaust and anti-Semitism. I focused on the dark side of humanity. I leave it to others to address all the positive things. And of course, ultimately, not just backing into tomorrow, looking at yesterday, but rather deriving some kind of guidance, some kind of lesson as to what we can do now. Because the tide that's been rising in years, for the past few years, you know, in America alone, has reached record levels. But you can stem a rising tide. Right. You can't stop a tidal wave. Right. And this tidal wave is washing over us. Right. And so what you do, what I do, and the people like Lauren Gross and the Gross Family Center and others, it's up to us to focus people's attention on putting unity back into the word community when it comes to Jewish people.
Powerful.
Because I'm afraid the failure of Jewish leadership has been not only to take unity out of community, but I actually think in many ways, intentionally, probably not, but unintentionally, they have actually increased polarity. And now is the time for us to come together. Look, Jew haters are unified by their anti-Semitism.
Yep. Even though they disagree about everything else, but that they agree on, and they'll work together.
We have our differences. We always have. 2 Jews, 3 opinions. We differ whether we're American Jews or Israeli Jews, diaspora Jews or not, or Ashkenazi versus Sephardic Jews. The thing is, whatever differences in our religiosity, whatever differences in our geography, now more than ever, we need to come together and realize we're fighting for our existence. And as I said in my talk, for Jewish people everywhere, we mustn't be so foolish to think, and it's even dangerous to think, that Israel's problem is not our problem. That Israel's fight for its right to exist is a fight for the right of every Jewish person to exist, to be free, to protect and defend themselves. And we should not always have to defending ourselves.
Yep, which is exactly the message I'm giving across is every single day we're on the defense. Every single day we're playing whack-a-mole. There are more lies. Every day is more lies, and hence the way the Jewish community, the way the Israeli foreign PR campaign, it's always focused on fighting the latest lies. We're never on the offense, standing up for ourselves. The best offense is the best defense is a good offense. And you're not empowering. We're not empowering Jews, especially the youth, to be proud of their Jewish identity by giving them what they should be proud of regarding the state of Israel and the truth about the state of Israel, if all we're doing is just giving them the talking points to fight the latest lie. It's whack-a-mole. And I'm gonna go a little dark, but it's about light, right? I'm very bullish about the future of the Jewish people, because I'm a believer in God, right? we only exist because of God, because we go against all logic and reason. We shouldn't be here. We should have been killed off millions of times throughout our history. So we are the proof that God exists, that we exist as a people today. So I'm bullish about the Jewish people, specifically a bright future in the land of Israel. I'm pessimistic about the future of American Jewry because of everything we're talking about. And the paradox is, which goes exactly to what you're talking about, if the Jewish community in America would stand up as proud Jews and unify about what makes us unique and special and our purpose in humanity, which is connected to our homeland, standing up proudly, yes, Israel is our ancestral homeland. Yes, we are blessed to be back there. No, there is no such thing as a Palestinian historic people that have rights to that land. Yes, we will live in peace with whoever Arab Muslims want to live in peace with us, but the whole cause called Palestine is a lie and is about destroying Israel. If our youth would be given that, if our Jewish communities would stand up for that and proudly of our Jewish identity, our traditions, regardless of religious level, then that's standing up to the bully.
Absolutely.
Right?
I could not have said it better.
But I don't see our leaders doing that.
Our
communities doing that.
Well, and we can't start with adults. We can't start with adults. Jewish kids need to know Jewish history, real Jewish history. And facts such as there was no Palestine. There was no capital. What leaders were there in this country they called Palestine? You know, we know the history, but
some of us know that. Some of us Jews know the history.
Well, I'm looking at you.
We know, the two of us, yes.
Believe me, I'm not saying that even most Jewish people do.
Right.
But that's just something, that's where education comes in. And we have to do a better job. But the generations that are marching against Israel, including left-wing Jews, the ones that call themselves social justice warriors, you know, the ones that are advocating for diversity, equity, and inclusion, are excluding anti-Semitism in their battle against bigotry.
Yep, include everyone but the Jew.
Not only include everyone but the Jew, but in some instances promoting violence, instigating violence on campuses against Jews.
No microaggressions of the wrong pronouns, but yes, genocide for the Jews.
But calling for the genocide of the Jews doesn't violate university policy. And the same presidents that wouldn't do that, wouldn't condemn it, who argued that, well, but this kind of Jew hatred is a function of ignorance, coming from three of the top universities, how ignorance flourishes in the top universities in America. What a paradox. To say this is a function of ignorance, but tolerated, even promoted on some of the best, on the campuses of the best colleges in the country. And so even acts of anti-Semitism, for some, are actually righteous acts of social justice. That's the perversion. That's how bad it's got.
Right. So to end on a positive, Dr. Berkowitz, what would your message be to Jewish leadership, Israeli leadership, to get us on the right path?
Focus on our community. Restore unity to the word Jewish community, because we're divided. And we can't, maybe it's more reasonable to think that we can only fight this war with partners, okay. But the evidence shows that we've had to stand alone and fight this battle by ourselves. And if, at the very least, we've got to start with forging with forging an enduring unity among Jews that will not erase our differences,
Right.
but will allow us to rise above them when it comes to defending our right to exist and the right to exist as the true indigenous people of Eretz Israel.
Right. Dr. Berkowitz, thank you so much for your time. A real pleasure to meet you in person and to have this talk with you and to hear your public talk. And I look forward to seeing many, many of our Jewish leaders following your advice and helping us move forward to a better day. In the meantime, I do try my best to help instill the understanding to my fellow Jews that even with the division, and with the division that happens at the top, within politics, because politics is divisive, and with the media, because the media is divisive, that's how they get their money. With that, in Israel, there is a strong sense of unity amongst a majority of the population, regardless of religious levels and political differences. The glue, there is a strong glue that keeps us together, and we see a spiritual revival there. And I do invite my fellow Jews, start thinking about their plans to come home, and tell your kids, start their plans. Tell your grandkids should start going to university in Israel. Why worry about anti-Semitism on American campuses? You get a great education, much cheaper, without the anti-Semitism in the Jewish homeland, within the atmosphere of your ancestral natural habitat. But with it all, I want everyone to understand, Am Yisrael Chai.
Am Yisrael Chai. And I would encourage everyone watching, I'm sure many of you already do, but the Pulse of Israel is the most interesting and most incisive analysis and most honest, in my opinion, analysis of what's going on, the challenges we face, and not only the opportunity, but the obligation we have as Jewish people to stand together. Because if we stand for nothing, we fall for everything. Thank you.
I am humbled for that. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Everyone,
Irving.
Dr. Irving Berkowitz, signing off for another episode of the Pulse of Israel, not yet back home in our ancestral homeland in the Judean hills or Jerusalem, but today still in rainy southern Florida. Thanks for watching. If you are not yet a subscriber, go to pulseofisrael.com and click to subscribe. If you like these videos, you want to help us get these messages like this from Dr. Berkowitz to be seen and heard by more people, just click on the donate button on pulseofisrael.com every once in a while. Signing off. Shalom, everyone, and thanks for watching.
Shalom.
Pulse of Israel, frontline videos from the Holy Land. Support our work by donating today.